Well, good morning, everybody. First off, I'd like the Assembly to know that I'm pretty honored to be here to speak to everyone that gathered, and I'm really grateful that everyone here is coming here to listen, and I really do appreciate it. So I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional territory we're on. The Blackfoot Territory, Treaty 7. I'd like to thank you for welcoming me into your lands to share some of my knowledge. I'm very humbled to be here. So my name is Josh Littlechild. I'm a Cree man, a Nahiawak from Ermineskin. My Cree nation is called NAWC2018. That's how we say it in Cree. Just wanted to share a few slides. That's me and my dogs. Well, actually, that's my daughter and my dogs. I have 3 Marimas. That's Eden, Edith, and Angus. They help out with a lot of, I guess, ranching work. We have goats and chickens and horses, and they help protect our livestock. And these guys have a pretty good life. I mean, they go through a couple bags of dog foods a week and lots of water, and they have a pretty big quarter section to run free on. So they work for me, and I really appreciate their companionship and their usefulness. And that's my daughter with them, and I'm really happy with those dogs. And I just thought I'd share this picture with all the animal lovers here today. Just a quick overview. What I want to talk about: the need for humane societies to work with Indigenous governance. I have a few stories about Cree humanity and dogs, our cosmology, about our origin stories and how we came to be here on this earth. A treaty right to govern, a little bit about the United Nations Declarations of Indigenous People, specifically Section 24, TRC's calls to action, the principles of them. I'm just going to talk a little bit about, it might be a far-fetched, but I would like to talk about dogs seen as a natural resource for Indigenous communities today still, and as such, I think they deserve the free and prior informed consent if they're going to be governed by any entities outside of the First Nations. I also have a little bit of a framework to how to approach First Nations bands, and if you're interested in helping with dog issues or cat issues, or if they approach you, how that relationship could help start if you're looking for a way to help the animals on First Nations. And I guess I could speak about the future of dogs in Ermineskin as well. So how I got to be here. I'm just going to run some slides, and these are just slides of pictures I have of our Indigenous people here in Canada with their dogs. So I'll be throwing them through as I go along. So my role in my community is I'm the tribal law officer, formerly the coordinator. I was tasked to protect and expand my nation's constitution, and upon some of those duties are enforcing our constitution on our lands for our citizens. And lo and behold, we had enacted a dog law, an animal control law in 2016, ratified by our membership, and I was tasked to enforce that. So it was a unique challenge because I just came out of school, really didn't have too much experience as I see here the vast amount of experience with animal control and care that's here in attendance. I basically it was thrown on my lap, and I found that I had nothing to work with. I was looking for help, and I was trying to do it on my own, build the build the dog care and control program, and I was struggling and I couldn't find any help, and I ended up getting some help from Alana and RJ at the Spay and Neuter Task Force, and they really helped bring in some ideas and how to govern our dogs with our law. So that was a big help, and today we have about 251 dogs registered on our nation, and we have combated certain. We've inoculated a lot of our dog population to combat distemper outbreaks, and we're moving forward with spay and neuter clinics this spring. It is spring, but earlier on in May. So I'm really excited for that. So I guess enough about me. I'd just like to share a few stories about our cosmology, about how we Cree people see the world to begin, and dogs play a huge role in how the world started. And it's interesting because I started researching when I was asked to come speak here. I started researching not only in anthropology documents, but I also started researching with elders from various communities. My spiritual name is Sitanka Wakamwi Chasha, and that means Holy Buffalo Man. And I spoke with an elder from South Dakota where I received my name. My mother's Sue, and he showed me this story, and I asked him if I could share it with you. I went to visit one of my relatives in the Blackfoot Nation out here, and he had another story about dogs, and so I phoned him up this morning, and I asked if I could share it with him, share it with you guys today at the session. But the first one I would like to share with you is from an elder in Ermineskin. His name is Jerry Saddleback. He's actually my grandfather. And when I approached him, I asked him if I could talk about dogs, about Cree views on dogs. And I got way more than I bargained for, because I got about 3.5 hours of lecture on how the world was created and the part that dogs play in it. And it was such an eye-opening experience, because I never really got to sit down with him and ask him how the world started. And he explained it to me, how it was done. And it was such a humbling experience, because it really made me realize that we're really part of an ecosystem, and we're a small part of it, but we're all in here together. So I guess I'll share that story. The dogs, when the creation started, there was a chief sky being, and that's how the universe was created. It was being made by this chief sky being, and there was tons of deities that were all aware of chief sky being ready to build this universe. And when he did, the chief sky being asked a lot of the deities to contribute to the development of this universe, and they did so in the form of a star blanket. And when that happened, there was a dog with him, a dog being, and also the chief sky being had like an assistant. And the assistant was so blown away by this creation of the star blanket, he kept on telling the chief sky being, "Oh, this universe you're creating, it's absolutely perfect. Why don't you just start it now and let this universe begin?" And Chief Sky Being was like, no, it's not ready yet, and I gotta do a few more things. And whilst Chief Sky Being took off to do a few things, the assistant got too rambunctious and too anxious, and he actually took the blankets and started the universe. And the dog was there with him and was watching. He's like, "Holy smokes, I can't believe this is happening." And so boom, we started the universe. And with that, in the Cree point of view, all the spirits had been asked to contribute something to create what we have. So like the moose, that was created by a mountain spirit. to help humanity survive on this climate. Because when we look at each other, at the bare bones of what we are, we're pathetic. We don't have any fur. We can't see really far. We can't really hear that good. We can't smell that great. Our senses are not built to really survive like animals would. And so one of the mountain spirits was like, oh, I feel so pitiful for these guys. I'm going to create the moose, the elk, the deer, so they could clothe themselves. They could eat, the buffalo. So that's a part of it. And how the dogs, especially canines, because the coyotes come into it quite a bit, is that the coyote was asked to go walk around the earth when the earth was created and map out where the land base was going to be, where we were going to live. And the dog, the canine, or I guess the coyote, and I'm kind of trepidatious. Is there still snow outside? Is there still snow outside? Because I could only tell these stories when there's snow outside. And so I'm kind of scared. So this dog, and we call this spirit Wasaki Chak. And Wasaki Chak is like a trickster. He's kind of like a person that teaches all of our morals. We have tons of stories that teach us our morals through his stories, through his. They're kind of like parables. And so Wasaki Chak would go around the earth and mark out where he is, how we designed our earth. And the chief sky being was pretty happy with that. And so he designated the dogs to be our companions between this realm, like the physical realm, and the spiritual realm. So in the southern skies, where the realm to the spirit world is open, they are our companions spiritually to bring us there when we die. And they were bestowed that honor, and with that, they received a few gifts, like they look young forever. That's what they describe that in Cree. Animals are so holy and so sacred that as they get old, they always kind of look young. And they're so sacred also is that the Creator made them so they're so close to the earth, because they're closer to the earth because their connection to the earth is a lot closer, and the sanctity of that relationship is actually representative of their physiology. And so with that, they play a huge role in our communities as nomadic people, former nomadic people. We really owe a lot to dogs as Cree people, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the dogs. They were our beasts of burden. They were companion animals. They were our resources, and it's a relationship we still honor today, even though there's some changes in since colonialization and First Nations were put on reserves. A lot of the animal relationship has changed quite a bit, and we're still trying to figure that out. But without further ado, I'd like to tell you another story. This one's the Blackfoot one. And this is actually my favorite, because my cousin would tell this to his children before they go to bed. So this story I'm telling you, you could share with your children. Now the story is yours, okay? So I hope if you go away from the conference, you could take this story. So and this is a Blackfoot story. So a long time ago, and I'm a Cree guy, Sioux guy, telling this story. So I'm gonna try to do it right. I don't want to offend my Blackfoot brother here. A long time ago, when the Earth was being created again, because they have a different story too on how the Earth was created. One of the great spirits, I don't think it was Napi, but one of the great spirits there told all the canines on the earth, said, hey, the humans are coming, and we got to figure out which one of you guys are going to help them out, because they're going to need help. They got no fur, they can't see far, they can't hear good, they don't run fast, they don't have sharp teeth, they're going to need a lot of help. And so the dogs all got together. They said, okay, well, the chief of the wolf, the chief of the fox, the chief of the canines, as we know them, and the chief of the coyotes got all of their tribes, I guess, tribes together, because animals do have religions and animals do speak their own language in some of our beliefs. And they got together on a hill, and all the head dogs, head foxes, head wolves, they all met in their lodge, in their teepee, and they started talking. They said, well, the Creator said we're supposed to take care of these people that are coming. And I guess the guidelines, the duties that were assigned are that we have to carry all their belongings. We have to stay up all night and make sure that no animals or any other warriors that are coming dangerous or not, we have to warn them. We have to stay with their kids all day and play with them while they're not around or they're out hunting and working. We have to basically, if they get too hungry, they have to eat us. And so we're not going to be hunting anymore. We're not going to be fending for ourselves. We're not going to really govern ourselves anymore. We're going to let these people decide what we're going to be doing with our lives. And the wolves were like, holy smokes, why would I give that up? Why would I do that? That's just crazy. That's not for us. And the foxes too, they said, oh, that's stupid. Why would we do that? And the coyotes agreed. They said, yeah, we like the way we live. We're not going to change the way we are because these people are coming. But the dogs said, well, it would be an honor to welcome these new beings to the earth, and we'll help them out. So I think we'll go. And then all the wolves and coyotes started laughing at them, and they said, you fools, why would you do this? You're not built for this. And they said, no, you know what, the dog said, no, we'll make it happen. We'll go for it. And so they said, okay, we hope you're happy with the decision. So the dogs came out of the lodge, went on top of the hill, and announced to the whole assembly of dogs, wolves, foxes, and coyotes, and they said, okay, well, it's been decided that from this day forth that the dogs are going to live with the humans, and the rest of us, we're going to stay how we live. And from here on out, and right in the middle of his speech, a dog farts. And the chief of the wolves was like, holy smokes, who was that? How dare he fart in the middle of my speech? And so he said, I want all of you to find out who that dog, fox, wolf, or coyote was, and you bring him to me because we're going to reprimand him. So they all started looking, all the dogs, they all started looking. And so they started smelling each other's butts to see if they, who it was. And to this day, when you see dogs greet each other, they're smelling each other's butts because they're still looking for that dog who farted in the middle of that speech. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and it's funny, and also too, at nighttime when you hear the coyotes howl and your dogs start barking, every night the coyotes are reminding the dogs how foolish they were for joining the humans and being basically their slaves. But when the dogs bark back, they're laughing back at them, saying, no, you guys are fools. Look at you. You're still out slaving, looking for your own food. I'm just well kept. I go inside. I lay down, watch TV. I got it good. So that's one story. That's another story. So I hope you can take that and share it with your families and keep it close to you when you're out in the field doing work, or maybe on a long drive or something. So yeah, that's a pretty famous Blackfoot story, and that really has to deal with their cosmology on how the dogs came in the picture for humans. So the last one I'd like to share is I got this story. I'm a Sundancer, and I partake in Sundancing every year. And one of the holy men that come teach us how to Sundance and do it properly, his name is Warfield. And Warfield, his father, had shared this story on Facebook. And boy, when I heard this story, I was like, holy smokes, I can't believe it. And I know just the people that need to hear this story. And so I've been sharing it with the rescues that we work with, and it's a pretty touching story. So this is a Sioux story from South Dakota. And this story really talks about the sacred bond between man and the dog from a Lakota point of view. A little background, in our ceremonies, on the fourth day of our Sundances, we partake in a very sacred ritual where we consume the flesh of a dog. And it's a ritual that we have been practicing for many centuries. Why we do this is pretty self-evident in the story I'm going to share with you. And so let me begin. Long time ago. And I hope you guys like the pictures. Do you like the pictures? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm just sharing. These ones were provided by Alana. She was showing us all the work she's done and the pictures that she's captured. The other ones I kind of grabbed from the internet, but I really like those old ones too, because it really shows how the dogs were used as work animals. So young men, a young warrior, a young little Sioux warrior, who was not really great at anything, took it upon himself to save a little orphan puppy and take care of him. The puppy was so pitiful and he was so sickly, but the boy took care of him until he was no longer sick and became healthy. The boy, he was a lot smaller than the other boys, and he was a lot more weaker, and always the slowest one in his group of friends. When he became a man, all the other boys, they grew up too, and they became men, and they became really notable warriors, war leaders, headmen, holy men, and hunters. The young man still had to find his calling, and it seemed that he failed at everything he did. The puppy that he had raised really became his closest dear friend and had become a very fine dog. The dog always traveled with him and even ate with him. The two were very inseparable. One night, the young man found himself alone, as he usually did, and he talked to his dear friends, and the dog was his only friend. He asked the dog, he told the dog, if only one day I could be as great as them. If I only wasn't so small, different, and strange, I would matter to everyone in my tribe. The dog looked at him intently, wagging its tail as always, and just smiled at his owner. It was that night he had a dream. In his dream, the dog spoke to him. You will be a great leader, and I will help you. A few days passed when there was no hunters, when the hunters weren't able to locate any of the buffalo herds. The people were going hungry, and winter was fast approaching. The dog came to him in his dream, and in his dream, the dog showed him where the buffalo were. In the morning, he set out to find the buffalo herd with his human, I guess. When they found them, he returned to the tribe and let the other people know where the buffalo were. So little by little, the dog would always come to this boy or this young man, into his dreams, and he would speak to him of things that would come to pass. There were things like when the enemies were going to come to do a raid, where to find the buffalo, and where to find enemy camps, and warnings of where things were to come. The young man became a very skilled hunter, and he always knew things that were going to happen. And people of his tribe started to believe that he had the power of foresight. But the people didn't know that the dog was telling him all these things in his dreams. For years, the dog helped him achieve great success at whatever he did. The holy men of his tribe came to respect him as a great seer. The time came where the tribe had wanted to honor this young man and give him praise and much respect for all the good deeds that he did. And so they gave him a bonnet and they put it on his head. It was on the fourth night that the dog had come to him in his dream, very sad. And the dog told the young man in his dream, "You forgot to tell them about me. I want to be honored as well because we do everything together." So the next day he gathered the council, the headmen and the holy men, and he told them that it was never himself that had these great abilities, but it was his dear and closest friend, his dog. So it was his dog that earned the bonnet and not me. That's what he said to the assembly there. And so his friend gifted that had the bonnet, they gifted it to the dog. They had another honoring ceremony and they gifted it to the dog. And that really made the dog happy, very happy, and the dog couldn't stop wagging his tail for days. Excuse me. But later on, a time of darkness fell upon the camps, and a terrible sickness came to fall over the people that not even the holy men could cure. And it was striking fear in the villages. And the man and his dog would do their best to help the people, but people were dying, and they were dying quickly. Many went on the hill to ask for medicine, but never came back with the cure. The sickness that befell on him, and the most skilled medicine men came to his side, but the days grew darker for him, the young man, and it seemed that the rest were dying. It was on his death robe that when his friend came to him one final time, the dog came to him in tears. "My friend," he told him, for years we have accomplished many things together, and you have treated me with honor, and it included me in everything you have done. And now I want to offer you the only thing that I have to give, and that is my life." The man couldn't stop crying. The dog told him to use his body and his flesh as medicine, so the people will get well. And this is a really important part of our Sundance. I'm sorry. I get really choked up because this is a part of our ceremonies that we still do today. And no matter how hard it was to keep these ceremonies alive, we still do them today. And so this dog, this man, he couldn't stop crying, and he said he would rather die than let this dog use their body to save the people. But the dog said no, and they proceeded to use this dog's body for medicine to heal the people. The dog gave him instructions in his dream to have what is to be done. So the next day, the holy men and warriors took the dog away to the hills, and they came back and gave the dog medicine to all the people and saved them from the sickness and dying and starvation. And all the people recovered quickly. So the dog gave himself to our people that we would live strong. and his medicine would always be powerful today. So that, and these stories are still honored, and these practices are still done today by our people. We honor our relationship with the dogs for bringing us here. And it is still sacred, and that relationship and bond is still there. So, moving forward, I'd like to tell one more, a little bit of research that I did about dogs in this area, according to Ruth Callahan's article on domestication of dogs and their early use of plains on the Great Plains. The dogs have been here for about 80, working with people, according to anthropological records, for about 8,500 years. They could go back further to 13 in some cases. Our people have had selective breeding programs during this time. We would castrate and control the sizes and the breeding populations of our dogs. Typically, a First Nation group, a family would hold close to 20 to 40 dogs per household because they were such great animals to help with carrying, hunting. And in Cree, the word atim means Cree, but it means dog in Cree. Just like how horse, mistatim, means, it really just means big dog. But the word atim means to go fast, and to go fast and bite in a certain manner. And what we really saw that as an advantageous way to collect food. And so that's the word that we use in Cree to describe a dog. And that's how we use them in our cyclical journey through the land. And so that's, I guess, a little bit of anthropology from Ruth Callahan's article. Typically, women were the ones that took care of dogs, and what they would do is when they were hauling, they were the ones that would call the dogs, or drop treats to keep the dogs going on the trail. And I find that funny because today, working in our communities, I find that dogs respond to me completely different than the way they would respond to a woman. I feel like they're more receptive to our women and the women that come on our reserves in our nations and work with dogs more than me. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I do notice that stuff. And I know these animals don't lie, and they tell the pretty good history. So I guess that's a little bit of the past of First Nations dogs, and I hope you took a bit from that. Where we are today in the present, that's what I'd like to talk about next. Since the colonization of our Turtle Island here from our cousins from Europe, it has changed the way Indigenous people have lived here forever. We were once nomadic people, and we become only recently being accustomed to a sedentary lifestyle. I mean, we've only really been on reserves since about the 1880s, at least in my case, the 1880s. Our treaty was signed in 1776, or 1886. So that wasn't too long. 1876. It wasn't too. Now, if you look at the broad spectrum of things, that's not very long. And so, we have become sedentary as a result of that. And so, with that relationship between, I guess the state of Canada and Indigenous folks, that really changed our relationship with animals, because our knowledge, centuries of knowledge, has really been based on how we worked with dogs in a very nomadic fashion. All of our knowledge comes from how we used dogs as we followed the buffalo, how we moved from winter camps to in the mountains to summer camps in the plains and out in the open, because our governing our governing was based on food acquisition. It was based all around that. And that was our relationship with the dogs, is how we could get food. So as we became more and more sedentary and asked to live on Indian reservations, that changed a lot, because our relationship changed a lot, because our knowledge of how we're supposed to handle dogs now is in a sedentary nature, and that became a big challenge. And I think today our people are struggling with that, because we have this binary jurisprudence, and jurisprudence means like just practice law theory. We have a natural law which we follow that comes from our origin stories, and these laws are principles that we abide by, and how we treat humanely everything in nature. But we also have now a Western law saying that we have to treat dogs a certain way according to these standards, and they could be penalized. We could be penalized, and for our people, I see today that it's a struggle, because you have this vast knowledge of Indigenous history and teachings, but now you're faced with a lot of Western standards that could be confusing for anyone. It's confusing because you're supposed to live traditionally as a First Nations person, but then you have this Western standard that's being brought to you, and which one do you do? It's always a push and pull, and it can be confusing. And so I see, and apart with the colonization, the assimilation of First Nations people in Canada, I feel that the traditional part of our dogs is being lost. Those stories that I had to acquiesce are not they're not really common knowledge anymore. It's hard to get these stories. You have to really go seek them out. And when you do get them, you hang on to them and share as much as you can. For us, our law was just recently enacted in 2 years ago. And that became a point where we had to start thinking in a two-way frame of mind. We have our traditional way, and we have the new way, the Western side of thinking. And we had many discussions when we were about to ratify this law with our community, talking about, well, we have values. How are these values going to be portrayed in our new law? How are these stories going to be portrayed in our dog law that we're going to put in our Constitution? And so in our preamble, we addressed a lot of where our rights come from, our inherent rights to govern ourselves, because as treaty signatories, we became subjects to the Queen, and we did agree to share the land, but we never ever ceded the right to govern ourselves. That was never a part of the deal, and today we act as such. And you see it all over the landscape today. I think I saw on the news this morning, provinces are fighting over pipelines, and First Nations are fighting over pipelines. And now I'm seeing First Nations asking the environmentalists to stop using Indigenous, veils to cover their agendas, because a lot of First Nations in modernity are looking to do business too, to protect their people. However, we're not here to talk about that. It was just an example. I might digress a bit. But ultimately, when we did design our law, we looked at how we could basically put our dogs to work for our people. And when I got there, and I'll just wrap up. When I got there, I found that there was a lot of rescues working on our First Nations, welcomed by our people, but they were also not really informing our government, our band councils, about what was going on with the dogs. And so I had to ask the societies and the rescues to just politely give me a phone call to talk about, how to work with our bands before they come onto our territories, and just let us know what's going on with the picking up dogs, and work with us if you want to drop off food, because we had to control our resource sites. We didn't want people just dropping off food everywhere and then having people, dogs creating new territories. That was a big problem. And when I asked people to stop, it was hard. It was really hard because I seemed like the bad guy because I wanted to stop resource sites, but I really welcomed the people coming, because we would distribute the food only to people that had registered dogs, and now we're only distributing food I think by the end of after the spay and neuter clinics, only to people that have neutered dogs and spayed dogs. So that's a challenge. And I just want to talk briefly, and I know I got caught up in the cosmology part, but if dogs are, some dogs are still used to, herd livestock on First Nations. Some dogs are used as transport, and I argue that they are considered still to us a natural resource. And I think societies that do want to help do have a duty to consult First Nations about dogs, because they still play they're in between a companion animal and a working animal. So they need, societies should come to bands and talk about it. And a great resource online is the INAC webpage. There's a list of all the First Nations in Canada and their band offices and their numbers that you could get a copy of on the internet. And you could just phone their band office and talk to the chief or the council and ask them or tell them about your program and what your wishes are. And usually you could get on a band council meeting, because everyone has a regular meeting usually, and discuss these things on how a society could work with First Nations and what your ideas are and what the needs are of the First Nations. I find that our people are pretty open to any help, whether it be for horses or livestock or wildlife. We're very open to those type of things. So that would be a great idea to get that. I just wanted to share a few articles. I think that when societies come work with First Nations, it is an act of reconciliation. I do believe that it falls in line with the 10 principles of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. And number 6 says, all Canadians as treaty people, because we all are treaty beneficiaries. When we sign treaty, Canadians sign treaty. And we are all beneficiaries of sharing this land. And it says, as Canadians, as treaty people, we share responsibility for establishing and maintaining mutual respectful relationships. We are all responsible for these actions, and as treaty people, we are all beneficiaries. So, that being said, welfare and humane societies that come work with First Nations people, I do believe that it's an act of reconciliation, mending together this horrible history between First Nations and Canada. And when I see Canadians come help First Nations, I really do believe that in this act, we could prove to the world why we're the best country in the world, because we could get over an atrocity that we've been dealing with in our history, and we could prove to the whole world that we could get through it by working together and reconciling. Article 24 of the United Nations. What's UNDRIP? United Nations Declaration and Rights of Indigenous People. Sorry, I got a mind blank there. Almost a senior moment, but I'm not that old. Indigenous people have the right to their traditional medicines and to maintain their health practices, including conservation of their vital medicinal plants, animals, and minerals. Indigenous people have the rights also have the right to access without any discrimination to all and health social services. So I think what the 24 says is we have a right to maintain animals, and I think having that would in mind would really help us join together and work with First Nations. So I really encourage everyone here today, if there is an interest, to go find out where your closest band is, and if you have dog food to distribute, or a horse program, or a livestock program, or any type of wildlife program that you feel might be beneficiary to all parties, the First Nations, the society, and the animals, to please, go ahead, look at this website and get a hold of the bands. And I think in the future, going hand in hand, I think there will be a standardization for First Nations in a Western sense for animal welfare, and I do see that as being a pretty high standard for animal care, hopefully in the next 10 years. And without further ado, that is my talk, my presentation. I do have about 10 minutes to open up the floor for any questions. If you do have any, please feel free to ask. There's microphones on the side. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we have one question here.
Hi, my name is Deborah Van de Kerkhoff. I'm from Manitoba. I work with Norway House Animal Rescue. We work specifically with northern Cree Nation communities. So one of the questions I have for you is, in regards to the dog population management program that you have right now, what are some of the things that you do in your community that you're seeing a difference and that you're seeing a benefit to when you're working with some of the local rescue groups?
Thank you for that. That's a good question. Deborah, from what I've seen, first there was a lot of confusion because people thought we were taking away dogs. They thought we were going to come, and if I registered their dogs, we were going to steal their dogs. And that wasn't the case. Our program is aimed to keeping dogs on our nation. And once we had we have a communication plan where we publish in our newsletter and on our websites, and where we speak to our members about certain issues like our law. And once I had a chance to explain to a lot of our members about, look, we're just registering our dogs. This is a benefit because if our dogs ever get picked up, we could find out who they belong to. Just a real simple registration was a big shock to our people because it was so new. And what I found is the outlying communities, the municipalities, were picking up some of our dogs. And I would get phone calls from our membership saying, look, I have a dog, and the kennel is not giving it back to me because I can't prove it because I don't have a license from either municipality. And it was like, oh, great, because you have a license from our nation. So I would phone up the kennel and say, hey, this is Josh. We have a dog here in your kennel, and Miss, our member here wants it back. It looks like this. She lives here. The dog is this old, and so we brought our dogs back, and that's a big one. Another one is welfare, talking about how to maintain our animals. We have a standardization now of how we expectations on our First Nation about where we could, how a dog is supposed to be held, how a dog is supposed to be confined, what necessities this dog needs, and the consequences if they're not met. And a few people, it's been a tough one. For the few cases that we've had where there's a massive welfare concern that was immediate that we had to take care of, it was really hard to tell people, like my relatives on my nation, to tell them that they were neglectful for, not bringing this animal in and taking certain measures to get that animal help. It was tough, but on the other hand, I've seen people from our nation come ask for help, and that to me blew me away, because so many people that had issues with their animals, they came forward and asked us to help. And that to me was really great, because now there's an avenue to help our people by ourselves and with the assistance of other societies to really build up our welfare for our animals. So from what I've seen a lot of the welfare for our animals has just skyrocketed. So having legislation like that really helps. So that's really good. Yes?
Good morning. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was great information that you shared. My name is Anne-Marie Husband. I'm the co-chair of the branch of the BC SPCA on Haida Gwaii off the coast of BC. And I'm wondering if you'd be able to share the specific language in that Constitution Amendment with us, because it would be great to have that detail when we work with our village councils, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. We're trying to develop a better relationship with our communities. And the big issue for us is bylaws. And I think there's something we could definitely learn from the work that you've done on the Constitution amendments. And two of the villages have what they call animal control bylaws, and we're trying to switch from animal control to animal responsibility. And so if you would be able to share that, that would be fabulous.
Okay, thank you, Anne-Marie. Quite simply, we do have, our law is published. When this law was before, well, the Indian Act, that's a whole nother bag. But the Indian Act used to have our First Nations get our laws approved by the minister. But now we don't need to go through that avenue. We just have to publish our laws online. And the Indian Act kind of just sets out what we're allowed to do. But I know in British Columbia, with the modern treaties out there, they have different agreements, and some First Nations don't fall under the Indian Act out there. So working with First Nations is sui generis. It's like they're every situation is unique. Like just like at all these tables, if you are First Nations, every one of these tables have a different unique need than any other table. I couldn't say all these tables are the same. Every table here has individual needs, and that's like First Nations. And with that, our law, for reference, is published on the First Nations Gazette, and it's called the Animal Control Law for Ermineskin Cree Nation, and it is published. So it's free for a lot of people to look at. And when I do questions like that about our Constitution, I definitely point people in that direction. Our law is one of the most humane ones, I think, out there. What I think you could do to help work with First Nations to build their constitution is just show them a law like that in a presentation and tailor it to the needs of that individual community. Because every First Nations, like I said before, is unique and have their own unique challenges, whether it be geographically or population-wise. And so that would be my approach. And making amendments to a bylaw, I would just bring it to their legal department and make these work with the First Nations to make suggestions to these changes. But the important part is to work with First Nations together, because we have a history of paternalism. Where we were considered wars of the state for a very long time. We were treated as children by the government, and we're still fighting for our rights to govern ourselves. And so working with First Nations rather than telling them what to do, that's a key. That's a key part for success is to collaborate together. And if you take that approach, I think the success of the amendments that you want to make will really go far. Yes?
Hi there. I want to thank you very much for being here. And this is my first experience at this conference. It's incredible. I'm so inspired. But thank you so much for being here. In my day-to-day life, truth and reconciliation, the calls to action is something that's very important to me as a visitor here on Treaty 7 lands and of the Métis. And I haven't had the experience of going out with Spay Neuter Task Force or anything, but I've heard so much about it. I'm curious about, in your work with non-Indigenous people, as to what depth of empathy you are finding in your work with people from outside of your community. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Kairos blanket exercise. It's a really beautiful experiential lesson that you can take that's hosted by Kairos. And it takes people through the history of Indigenous people from Turtle Island to today. And I wonder if you're familiar with it. I don't want to speak out of turn in terms of this conference. Having so many people together at the same time might be a great opportunity to tack on a 3-hour blanket exercise. And whether doing that at the outset would give some depth of empathy and understanding of how we are today, and to then be able to come more to the table on a level playing field and really to work better together. I'm not sure what your thoughts would be on that.
I certainly agree that a blanket exercise, if you can, educate yourself. I encourage everyone here to learn about treaties, to learn about First Nations in your area and the history, the rich history that's in your area that is involved where you live. I know that our government education program really only teaches one side of the history of Canada, and really it really strokes, the Canadian state about how good they are. And I remember learning about Chief Pontiac, in Saskatchewan, and I was asking my teacher, I was like, whoa, there's way more chiefs. Like, there's Chief Big Bear, there's Chief Poundmaker. How come we're not talking about that? And the curriculum really doesn't allow that to expand. So I understand that, we are a result of this product, and things like that are changing now. And so I do think it would be excellent to have a blanket exercise, for everyone here to learn. I am aware of it. I'm not too sure about the whole details because I actually haven't participated in it. I know my wife has at a school. She's a teacher, and she tells me all about it, how touching the ceremony is and how awakening it is. And I think that exercise, if you can, do try it. It really tells you about how we got to where we are. And as a child of a residential school survivor, I still feel that trauma. Stuff that I didn't understand earlier on in my life, I understand now why the things are. So I do recommend it. And I do find that everyone that comes and works with First Nations, in my experience, have been deeply empathetic. The concern for the dog, the understanding of our situation, why we're here. If the people that come in, they're not shocked. They're just there to work for the dogs, and I feel really comfortable every time the volunteers come, and they're real people. They really understand and very sympathetic to our state. So yeah, thanks.
Josh, we just have our last question over here. Hi.
Okay.
Tansei, my name is Leah Arkan. I'm from Muskeg Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan, and I'm a teacher in Thunderchild First Nations, which is also located in Treaty 6. I was looking forward to this presentation the most. I have 14 res dogs in my care right now. 2 of them are mine permanently, and the other ones I'm fostering and rehoming. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to sort of echo what Josh has been saying about reaching out to First Nations communities and volunteering to help. Like all animals, there are a lot of stray dogs guaranteed in every First Nations community that need your help. So yeah, just by donating food or getting the dogs spayed or neutered definitely helps a lot, because I know in Thunderchild for sure there are some like wild stray dogs who become really aggressive because they don't have the care that they need or the food that they need. So I just really wanted to share that and take this opportunity. But yeah, thank you for your presentation and thanks for listening.
Hi. Yeah, it is important to do this thing, the reach out for First Nations like Miss Arkan. Hi, and Skoptaman. One thing is important is we do have a high population of free-roaming dogs, and the common perception is that they're strays. And one challenge that I face is that showing we have a highway that goes right through our reserve, our nation, and I have to put an ordinance in saying to the gas station, don't let anybody take our dogs. These dogs that are showing up at the gas station usually have a home. And sometimes the homes that the dogs belong to are 3 or 4 households. They're community dogs. They're not just one owner. So, and that goes back to saying every First Nation is unique. I mean, what is practical on a municipality with nice boxed homes with nice boxed fences is not really practical on a First Nations with no fences, free roaming dogs. A big scare about our dogs is tying them up that makes them aggressive, and so a lot of people bring them, just let them run free, and we have healthy dogs, they're fed. We only had a few welfare cases out of the 500 or so dogs that we have, and that's one thing that a perception I'm trying to change a lot is that our dogs, because of our history of nomadicism, we're still learning how to be sedentary. Our dogs roam free, and it doesn't mean we don't love them or we don't care for them. We just allow them to be dogs. We allow them to go mingle, go explore, because we respect them, because we honor who they are. And that may be contrary to mainstream Canadian views, but that's the way we are, especially in my nation. And those are the values that we still hold, because we're still getting used to this new system. And there is a struggle for changing those views that we don't care for our dogs. We really just let them run free and be dogs. But yes, those were good words. And if there's no more questions, I would just like to thank everyone here for looking at my slides and listening to my story and the story I gave to you. I hope you could take it home and share with your children when you're putting them to bed. And thank you very much. It was an honor to be here.